The Mossad has a problem Silicon Valley would kill for. Its failures keep turning into billion-dollar companies. That began with wiretaps, forged passports, and stolen mainframes quietly morphed into the code, chips, and cyber tools that power Israel's tech boom. Officially, it is coincidence. Unofficially, it is design. Here is how a secret service became a startup accelerator. On paper, Israel should never have become a tech superpower. Tiny population, no natural resources, surrounded by hostile neighbors. Yet by the early 2000s, it had more startups per capita than anywhere on Earth, except one place, the United States. Venture capitalists called it the startup nation. They talked about talent, culture, and military service. What they rarely said out loud was that behind many of the most important breakthroughs stood the same quiet institution. Tamir Pardo was a career Mossad officer who understood code and cables better than most executives. His job was simple and impossible: keep Israel's enemies blind while keeping Israel's networks alive. If he got it wrong, agents died and collapsed. If he got it right, something worse could happen. The tools he built for espionage would escape into the civilian world and change the global economy. The pattern began before there was a state to protect. In the 1930s and 40s, Jewish underground groups in British-controlled Palestine needed radios, encryption, and surveillance just to survive. Couriers disappeared. Informants were killed. Every leak meant someone stopped breathing in a back alley. The lesson was brutal and permanent. Technology was not a luxury. It was the difference between a funeral and another day alive. After independence, Israel's intelligence services formalized that obsession. The Mossad needed safe passports, unbreakable codes, and ways to listen without being heard. But Israel was poor. It could not buy everything it needed. So it began to. Engineers who designed custom bugging devices for later took those skills into private companies. Cryptographers who protected secret cables became the first generation of Israeli cybersecurity founders. One of the earliest visible fractures between secret work and public tech came from a unit most people outside Israel had never heard of: Unit 8200. Officially, it belonged to military intelligence, not the Mossad. In reality, they were joined at the hip. Mossad missions relied on 8200's ability to break foreign codes and safeguard Israel's own. Young conscripts spent their early 20s in interception systems, analyzing massive data streams and writing code to find patterns in chaos. The stakes were not academic. In the 1970s and 80s, failed signals work meant agents in Arab capitals were exposed and sometimes murdered. A missed intercept could mean a bus bombing or a hijacked plane. When a source vanished, people inside 8200 knew it might be because a line of code was flawed. That kind of pressure forged a specific mindset: move fast, but no bugs. Innovate, but do not break production. Years later, venture capitalists would describe the same mindset as the perfect founder profile. By the 1990s, the Mossad's needs had outgrown its own walls. It needed tools to track money, monitor phones, and infiltrate emerging computer networks. Commercial off-the-shelf software was not enough. So a quiet pattern emerged. Veterans left elite intelligence roles and founded companies that, on the surface, sold products to banks, telecoms, and corporations. In practice, their first and most important customer often sat in a secure compound outside Tel Aviv. One early wave focused on firewalls and intrusion detection. The world saw a cluster of Israeli security startups. Insiders saw something else: the externalization of tools once reserved for spies. Techniques developed to keep hostile intelligence agencies out of classified networks became products guarding multinational corporations. The Mossad did not own these companies, but it had helped train their founders, define their problems, and in some cases, fund their earliest prototypes through opaque defense budgets. Then came a that showed how far this symbiosis could go. In the early 2000s, as the internet exploded, so did the attack surface for everyone. Israel's enemies moved online. Terrorist cells used encrypted chat. Rival states probed critical infrastructure. The Mossad and 8200 needed offensive cyber capabilities that did not officially exist. Ing them entirely in-house would be slow and visible. So a new model emerged: private firms staffed by former operatives, developing zero-day exploits and spyware, selling them under export licenses tightly overseen by the state. One of those firms would later become infamous worldwide for its phone hacking tools. Its founders had cut their teeth inside classified programs. The same skills that once allowed the Mossad to silently enter an adversary's network now allowed a private company to break into smartphones on behalf of paying clients. Officially, this was about law enforcement and counterterrorism. Unofficially, it blurred the line between national security and commercial product in a way almost no other country had attempted. Inside Israel, the effect was seismic. Aspiring entrepreneurs saw that the fastest path to a serious startup was not a business school, but an intelligence unit. Young recruits fought to get into 8200 or Mossad-linked technical roles, not just out of patriotism, but because alumni from those units raised money effortlessly. Investors had learned the pattern. If someone had spent years solving impossible problems for the Mossad, they were probably capable of a scalable product. The Mossad, for its part, adapted again. It created liaison offices that quietly monitored the tech, steering talent and occasionally nudging companies toward technologies the service might someday need. In some cases, it reportedly provided seed funding through front organizations. In others, it offered something more valuable than cash: real-world problems that no commercial customer could articulate. How do you track a courier who never uses the same phone twice? How do you detect a nuclear program disguised as a civilian project? How do you sift billions of digital crumbs to find one person planning an attack? Every time a startup solved one of those problems, it created something that could be sold, in modified form, to the broader market. Tools for analyzing intercepted communications became big data analytics platforms. Systems built to monitor borders became logistics optimization software. Image recognition tuned to find missile launchers and satellite photos turned into consumer apps that tagged FRIS in pictures. By the mid-2000s, the feedback loop was undeniable. S-generated technical demands. Those demands shaped what young engineers learned on the job. When they left, they carried that knowledge into startups. The startups raised capital, hired more veterans, and built products that, in turn, gave the Mossad new capabilities at commercial prices. The line between national project and private enterprise blurred into a single ecosystem. But this synergy came with a hidden cost. The same offensive tools that helped dismantle terror networks could be sold to regimes with far looser definitions of threat. Spyware designed with Mossad-grade sophistication ate up on the phones of journalists and dissidents around the world. Each revelation triggered outrage, sanctions, and calls for tighter regulation. Behind closed doors, Israeli officials faced an uncomfortable choice. Option 1, clamp down hard, restrict exports, and risk strangling a lucrative, strategically useful industry. Option 2, keep the pipeline open, accept reputational damage, and hope that the benefits to national security outweighed the moral and diplomatic fallout. They chose a middle path that satisfied no one completely. Export controls tightened on paper. Some licenses were re-KED. Certain firms were quietly nudged to rebrand, restructure, or shut down controversial product lines. Yet the core model survived. Intelligence veterans kept founding companies. Global customers kept buying their tools. The Mossad kept benefiting from a tech sector that spoke its language and owed much of its existence to its shadow. Today, when investors praise Israel's innovation engine, they point to universities, incubators, and venture funds. Few mention the IAS that never make headlines, the missions where a missed packet meant someone died, or the classified budgets that turned code into weapons and then into products. Yet the fingerprints are everywhere. In the dominance of Israeli cybersecurity, in the density of surveillance and analytics startups, in the quiet comfort with Einang tools that see, hear, and know more than they should. This account draws on public reporting, declassified material, and testimonies from veterans who described their journey from secret units to startup boardrooms. The next time you hear about a breakthrough security product or a new data platform from Tel Aviv, ask yourself a question. If the code in your phone or your office once began as a Mossad requirement, are you comfortable with that lineage? Type M if you think this fusion of espionage and entrepreneurship is a necessary edge, or C if you think the cost to privacy and trust is too high. Then check the comments to see which side your world has chosen.